So, I mean, there's so many different directions we could go with this, but I
Yeah.
think for people coming in, so maybe to give you some context with this Unleash the Beast title, the whole idea behind it is not, I'm trying to put words to something which, like this sense of embodiment, which I imagine you understand, the sense of like landing of being in the body, not in the mind, which to me has led to all kinds of different, emotional, energetic releases, sometimes growling, all kinds of things that can be very animalistic and beastly in a way. And so there's something very profound and healing and powerful when I think we as humans get in touch with that aspect of ourselves and get out of the head, this, thinking mind that's always going, and start to feel. It's more animalistic. And so that's the whole idea behind Unleash the Beast. It's not necessarily about making money or succeeding in anything in particular. It's just about being who we are, which is very similar to what you're talking about with the non-duality that you are already yourself. It's just getting all that shit out of the way. So to me, it makes sense. Imagine to you, it makes sense too. But to someone who's hasn't had 5-MeO or hasn't had one of these breakthrough experiences with psychedelics, I imagine sometimes it's like, I've had this trouble too, trying to explain some of these things to people of what it's actually like is can be very difficult because there's no frame of reference. So, it's nice to say, oh, it's all well and good and we're all expressions of the universal consciousness. But how would you put that into words that someone who's not maybe there yet or hasn't had that experience yet, that they might be able to understand? Like, one place to start would be like, what does that mean for your day to day reality in practical terms?
Well, in practical terms, what it really comes down to is that, you know, people come up with all kinds of ideas like, well, what is my purpose? What is my mission? Who should I be? What am I supposed to do? And these are all questions of the ego, right? Through our self-awareness, we know that we exist, we know that we're here, and we ask all these questions like, is somebody in charge? What's going on here? What are the rules? How do I play right? And all of those are questions of the ego, and then the ego throws out answers to those and then says, okay, I'm going to conform to those or not conform to those answers. But my basic answer to it is, look, your job is to be yourself. And the problem is that it's not really possible for people to fully authentically be themselves if they do not know who and what they are. So this process of learning how to authentically be yourself is involved in the process of also discovering the authentic nature of the self. And I know that that can sound new agey and wishy-washy, and lots of people use those terms. But I have a very specific meaning behind that, and that is that, just to put it into very simple language, as I like to tell people, like, for example, in my 2009 book, Being Human, which is the first book that I wrote after going through this own transformation within myself. So at the very end of the book, I have these entheogenic affirmations. And they're supposed to be a little bit cheeky. And so the first one says, guess what? You are God. Now get over it. So that kind of encapsulates this idea of non-duality that when I use the word God, what I'm referring to is that there is one universal consciousness and being. And that is the true nature of all identity. So if I strip away my Martinness, if I strip away my humanness, if I strip away all of my social, political, family, cultural, ethnic identities, if I strip all of that away, we get down to what's at the core of it. What people can discover about themselves is like, oh shit, I'm it. I am this universal consciousness and universal being that is not attached to any one particular form. And because every person can experience that for him or herself, that means that we all have the same ultimate identity. We are all the universal consciousness and being that are performing as these different characters through these different vehicles, which is a term that I like to use to refer to the body. So the body is the vehicle. The character is the personality, the persona, the ego that says, hi, I'm Martin. Hi, I'm John. Martin thinks these things, acts these ways. John acts these ways, has these thoughts, has these personal experiences. But when we go beyond that, you and I both can experience, I am the universal consciousness. I am the universal being. And that universal being is not transcendent of reality. It actually is reality. itself, so that this awareness, in a sense, is infused within everything that exists, that everything that we experience is just this one universal being that is interacting with itself through these different characters and these different guises of subject and object, me and not me. So that's why, I have this little entheogenic affirmation. Guess what? You are God. Now get over it. And that's also the important part, because, when people go through these experiences, sometimes they're like, oh yeah, I, I am God. I am the chosen one. I am the authority. I am the one that needs to be worshiped and bowed down to. And that's why I say, now get over it, because it's true for everybody. Everyone is that. No one is special in that sense. We're all very, very special, but also no one is special. And another one that I have here is you are God's altered state. So when this universal consciousness forgets, oh yeah, I'm the universal consciousness, it thinks, oh, I'm Martin. So when God is tripping really hard, God thinks it's Martin. And then when Martin is tripping really hard, he realizes, oh, I'm the universal consciousness. And another one, just God doesn't take you seriously, so why should you? And that's another thing with the ego, where we take everything so seriously. We take everything so personally. We invest so much meaning into all the events of our lives and all of our interpretations, there's a little joke that I like to use with this, where, I do a lot of bird photography. It's one of my personal passions. And yeah, I like to photograph lots of raptors, eagles, hawks, things like that. And this is kind of endemic in the spiritual world, where people say, oh, I saw an eagle and it meant that I was on the right path because it gave me a blessing or something like that. That, we impose all of this meaning onto everything that happens all the time. And every last little bit of that is invented by the ego. It's not real. It's just the imposition of meaning onto the experience of reality. So my joke is, people ask me like, oh, wow, you saw an eagle. What did that mean? And my answer is, it means I was at the right place at the right time to photograph an eagle. Doesn't mean anything more than that. And so it's kind of getting into this idea of stop taking things so seriously. Stop imposing so much meaning, because basically through the ego, we are addicted to the meaning-making function of the ego. And the only thing that makes meaning is the ego. It's the self-awareness that is able to ask questions, propose answers, and then attach themselves to those. So anyway, to get back to your question, this process of learning how to really authentically be yourself in your body, which is also another place where I make a distinction that a lot of quote-unquote meditation traditions propose a very disembodied and disconnected view of liberation, that I'm going to float off into the ethers, I'm going to leave my body behind, I'm going to ascend through these different realms, and then I'm going to live in this pure spiritual realm, and I'm just going to sit in meditation the rest of my life. And for me, that's just a total cop-out. That's just spiritual bypassing to the extreme degree. So for me, the question is, how do I land that in my body, in my being? And that's where I introduce this idea of this energetic reformatting that takes place. So sorry, this is kind of a long answer, but I'm getting to it. So the ego I like to identify is just patterns of energetic expression, embodiment, and thought and belief with which we identify through a self-aware capacity. Meaning that everything that happens with the ego is just a pattern. It's a patterned form of expression. So, for example, right now, anybody who's familiar with me or has listened to me, they could identify, oh yeah, that's Martin speaking. I can hear his voice. I know that that's him. These are the words that he likes to use. This is the way that he likes to express himself. It's all just patterned stuff, and I identify with that and say, oh yeah, that's me. But if I were to talk to you in a funny voice like that, you'd say, oh, well, maybe that's not Martin. Maybe that he's just trying to be a leprechaun or some crazy shit like that. And if I went around like that all the time, people would say, dude, like, why are you being this bizarre leprechaun? And I could say, oh, it's performance art. But if I started to identify with that, then that could become my new identity. So what we get a lot of times is people swap one set of patterns for another as they shift and change their identity, as they're looking for that authentic self. But the only way to really get to the authentic self is to transcend beyond all of these limited energetic patterns of expression so that we can go into a state of infinite awareness and infinite energetic expansion to learn who and what we truly are. And then it's a matter of how do I bring that back into my embodied existence in a way that actually helps free me from the habitual patterning of the ego and the limiting identification with it. And so by encountering ourselves at the deepest level, that's where we have the greatest potential to actually transform who and what we are into a more authentically embodied mode of being, where we're not bound by the ego. So the ego at that point is no longer a prison. I like to liken it more to a set of clothing that we can take on and off as needed, according to whatever our energetic environment or interaction might be. And so it's a long answer with a lot of different ideas, but that's basically what you're seeing in that silomethoxin video.
Right. Right. I'm going to play devil's advocate just because, like, I think I know what you're talking
Sure.
about because I've worked a lot with psychedelics and had some of these experiences. But even on people who've had, worked with psychedelics have often, a lot of them haven't. I don't know. Like, not everyone who seems to, take psychedelics has these types of experiences. So, like, part of me wants to, ask
No.
on behalf of those people, what's the point? Like, why? Like, because that's when I would try to explain some of these experiences to other people. I could see their eyes would kind of glaze over, like they didn't get it. It's just like what? Like, huh? Like, it all sounds great, like with the nice words, universal consciousness and awareness and authenticity, and it sounds great. It's nice words, but I imagine there's someone out there that's like, yeah, but so what? Like, so like, I know there's something there, but how would you describe, like, if someone's saying that, like, what's the point of this? Like, why bother? Why not just live your life?
Yeah. Well, that's honestly, it's a very good question. And so I always think that it's best to kind of